The US and UK militaries have struck deeply hardened targets in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen over the weekend. It was in response to the terrorist group's constant attacks on international shipping and naval vessels in the Red Sea. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, it appears as though Houthi storage facilities were targeted along with missile systems, launchers, and air defense systems.
Yeah, so the question is now, how will this deterrence work against not just the Houthis, but sending the message back home to Iran's regime that continues to puppeteer its proxies against elements in the West and, of course, Israel. We've been talking about this for a while. For the last decade or more, Iran's regime has fixated itself on building its assets and its proxies outside its borders in the region to flex its muscles, to line them up. And now we see it's showtime, right? So you're watching Hezbollah in Lebanon, you're watching Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the West Bank and Gaza, you're watching, of course, the Houthis in Yemen, insurgencies in Syria and Iraq. They're all lined up and ready to attack U.S. assets, and we have withdrawn from there. So we're not as invested in terms of manpower. And of course, the rhetoric coming from the White House has not been anything but harsh against the Iran's regime. So Tehran's hearing a very different tune for the last 3 years, of course, and now we are trying to show them some deterrence, say, this is not going to be okay against the United States, but that Yemen policy, that Houthi policy has to be much more across the board in terms of sanctions, in terms of partnering with the the benign elements inside Yemen to fight the terrorist elements of the Iran regime, to truly crack down on what Iran's regime has done throughout the region. And I just don't think the White House has prepared such a plan of deterrence.
Lisa, there are reports coming in that American bases once again were attacked by unmanned aerial vehicles and missiles just hours after retaliatory strikes by the U.S. against Iranian-backed militias in both Syria and Iraq.
Right, we're playing whack-a-mole once again. So, responding to these, what the White House deems as these one-offs, right? So, trying to keep up with the attacks coming from the proxies, Iran's proxies in the Middle East, but at the same time, trying not to escalate things. Look, we are 1 year out from having a new president, perhaps here in the United States, or re-electing Joe Biden, it seems. So, of course, foreign policy very important right now. Getting involved in another war, very questionable right now. So what the White House is trying to do, of course, is trying to distance itself from this. Perhaps they'd want to get involved in a war closer to election time and try to hold off a bit till we get a bit closer, or try to figure out what's going on in Ukraine first so that we're not spread so thin all throughout the world. It's difficult, but what I can say is deterrence begins at the White House, not on the battlefield. I don't think these one-off responses, although they're very important, are sending a clear message to Tehran, and that's really the question. Is the deterrence working? Are we flexing enough for that Iran's regime to actually back down and not double down as we have seen in recent months?
Closer to home, we've seen the many trucks which participated in the convoy in Texas, Lisa, as many have been protesting the amount of illegal border crossings. Well, sources from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency say they're also seeing a high trend of crossings, illegal crossings, and where you are in California and Arizona as well.
Right. So they're moving over. What does this tell us? What Texas has taken on by itself. So, as we know, the state of Texas is actually in a fight with the White House. They've gone to court over this. The Biden White House does not want Texas to crack down on immigration the way that it has. They basically have taken the Donald Trump plan as a state, right? And they are trying to stop this the sheer numbers of immigrants coming over daily. The fact that we now have numbers from the last couple of months, that the numbers are increasing in Arizona and California and decreasing in Texas, tells us one thing: it's working. Whatever Texas is doing to try to keep the migrants out is working, which tells us there is a way to slow this wave of migrants coming into the country. Look, there's an increase in crime. We cannot vet them. There's an increase in numbers of migrants coming over that are on the FBI's most wanted list. Let's talk about those bad actors that are not on the FBI's most wanted list and should be, right? There's no way to vet them. The disease, the just accountability of these numbers, even the fact that they would be, individuals who want to come over here for the American dream and opportunity. The cities cannot absorb them. And we're watching Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York, Los Angeles overflowing, not able to absorb these numbers. And they end up on the streets or end up getting involved in crime or getting raped or getting involved in things that they did not come to the United States for. So the fact that we're seeing it works, I think it should be a copycat model for many other states on the border. It should be a message to the White House that this is the way to do it. If we actually want to give these migrants a chance, this is the way to do it.
How much of an election issue will this be for Joe Biden?
So many people believe that this will be the number 1 election issue. If you look at illegal immigration as an economic issue, it's a safety issue, it's a national security issue. Across the board, it's a fentanyl issue, right? For a lot of suburban families are having issues with the illegal drug flow into the country. It really covers a lot of the issues that the average American faces on a daily basis right now, and the deterioration of the nation. Right now, we're talking about some of these migrants getting debit cards. I mean, that's taxpayer money. So when people are struggling to pay, $8 for milk and $7 for a carton of eggs, they start to question why people who just illegally came into the country are now getting debit cards from their taxpayer money. So there will be a lot of questions, and I think this will be a bipartisan issue. I think Americans are understanding, even in blue cities, the bluest of the blue, that once really we're proud of the fact that they're sanctuary cities, realize that, sanctuary is a wonderful concept in its ideology, but in practice is not something that we can do, particularly with the number of migrants that are coming over. And it's going to cost Americans. It's going to cost them their lives in terms of safety. It's going to cost them money in terms of just the, what we have to do to just help them resettle and such. So I think that it will become a very major issue, and lawmakers on both sides have to come up with something substantial to present.
As a number of countries have suspended funding to UNRWA, the UN Palestinian aid agency, in light of the allegations that 12 of its members participated in the October 7th attacks against Israel, comes word that the United Arab Emirates allocated $5 million in support of UNRWA in Gaza, Lisa. The country said the money will be dedicated solely to helping Palestinian refugees, but the question remains, how much will actually make its way into the hands of Hamas?
Right. And, in light of the new information, and it's not new, I will get into that. I've actually been covering this for over 10 years as to what UNRWA has been doing with the aid money that it gets. A lot of that aid money coming from the United States, and of course other Western countries, Europe, Canada. I'm sure are all upset about the new footage of these. Not just the UNRWA, the 12, there's much more involvement, meaning footage of weapons being held in UNRWA schools, being hidden there, making it very difficult for the Israelis to find Hamas assets and things because they're so deeply hidden. And who's helping that? That's aiding a terrorist entity. Obviously, Hamas being in power in Gaza makes this very difficult. But we have known this for years, that UNRWA has not taken accountability for the indoctrination, for again, using schools, using hospitals, not really being a partner with the West, even though it's getting this money. And now, of course, finding out the cherry on top that they have been involved in the Hamas attack of October 7th, set the Europeans, the Australians, the Americans off, and they withdrew their aid money for now. This was halted. If you remember, it was also halted under Donald Trump, who said, I know that this money is going towards terrorism. So again, this is not a new thing. The Americans have known about UNRWA not being such a legitimate aid organization to help Palestinians for just aid. Now we get to the United Arab Emirates are very worried about the fact that, well, this is also the aid organization that could provide aid, right? Potentially provide aid. So they want to continue their aid money. AOC is another partner in this. She thinks that the money to the UNRWA should be reinstated right away. So, before we have any sort of guarantee that this money is not going into terrorist hands, that they're not going to be complicit in these terrorist crimes, there's no reason for the West to be involved in all of this. Now, what makes this tricky is the United Arab Emirates is also a co-signer of the Abraham Accords. So meaning they have normalized relations with Israel. Obviously, it behooves everyone here to have peace in the region. So for them to turn around and give money to an organization that is aiding terrorists is not a good look. But we're still hopeful that once the dust settles, a lot of Arab nations will go back to wanting peace between obviously both sides, but more so aligning themselves with Israel as a way forward to actually have regional stability and prosperity, to have economic trade and other opportunities between the nations.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson announced over the weekend that he would be introducing a standalone bill that would offer aid to Israel amid the war in Gaza. Now, according to NBC News, it would offer $17.6 billion in military aid to Israel, Lisa.
Yeah, as we know, there are players inside both the Senate and Congress, more so Congress, that those are the visible players that are very much against giving money to Israel. So they will probably stand against it. But the reason why he is introducing a standalone bill is because the Democrats have wanted to couple together any aid for Israel, because they know that that's an important issue for most, I should say. But it's a bipartisan issue, but very much important for the Republicans. They want to couple that with Ukraine funding as well. And now there has been sort of a enough is enough kind of sentiments across the board with giving more money to Ukraine, but we will see what shall happen. I think a lot of lawmakers say enough is enough. Obviously, the issue with Israel, they're an ally. This is very immediate. They're fighting the fight for all of us. If Hamas grows, if Iran's regime grows, they're basically doing the dirty work for the West. And because of that, they see that as a priority, and in having a standalone bill just for Israel and not having to, pork barrel this all together with other issues.
Let's talk about anti-Semitism for just a moment here. I mean, it's around campuses around North America. We're seeing it in so many other areas around the world. It continues to rear its ugly head, Lisa, and it appears to be doing so in the workplace as well. According to the New York Post, a survey from late 2022 said that 26% of recruiters said they were less likely to move forward with a Jewish candidate, and around 17% of hiring managers went as far as to admit their company's management told them not to hire any Jews.
Yeah. Oh I mean, how did we get here, right? How the year 2024, we should even say, don't hire XYZ or hire XYZ. What happened to merit? I mean, what happened to experience? What happened to people who are just diverse in their, in their thoughts and bring something to the table? This is very, very unfortunate. Now, the reason for this, I just want to get into what the very, very incorrect premise of all of this is. When DEI is supposed to protect minorities or protect a certain group, they view Jews as the privileged white, and therefore do not protect them or do not offer any protection or any defense because of that. And now that is so incredibly incorrect. As you and I both know, Jews come in all colors and varieties and ethnic backgrounds. And even in Israel, there's over 50% are of Sephardic background, which means they are either of African or Middle Eastern descent, and are very dark in skin color. The fact that we even have to talk about this is asinine, right? Someone's skin color should actually be a reason for them to be hired or not hired in this case. This also has roots in the, Occupy Wall Street kind of, the Jews control the world kind of, horrific conspiracy theories where they want to stop, again, the privileged white from progressing further and not hire them. I have actually heard from someone who lives here in Los Angeles that he as a Jewish white man had a very, very difficult time finding work. He was out of work for over a year and a half. Very specifically, his skill set very specific, his education very specific, and he had a very difficult time finding work. And he also attributed it to this kind of incorrect ideology and premise of not hiring Jewish candidates. So very, very unfortunate. How I really hope the world, if this is a pendulum, I hope that we're at one extreme and we bounce back somewhere to the middle, where we look at people for who they are, what they offer, their values and their skill sets, their experience, their thoughts, and all of that, and none of this other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay away from the discrimination and racism. Lisa, the U.S. Defense Department's latest China military power report was released. It focused on China's buildup and modernization program. The report also talks about how the Chinese Navy continued to beef up what is already the world's largest fleet.
Yeah, isn't this crazy? Look, we have had so many reports in the last year talk about different parts of China's military might, and have a report based out of the United States saying, oops, we didn't realize how advanced they are getting. They are perhaps more advanced than we are. And Again, this is a scary thought to think that the United States is sleeping on any of this, to have a report that actually openly says that we are not as advanced as the Chinese are. They're obviously listening. They obviously know what they're doing. The Chinese are masterful at copycat technology, beating out their opponents, figuring out what their opponents are doing, and then surpassing them. We're talking about cyber capabilities, we're talking about military capabilities, and in this case, naval capabilities. I think it's a big wake-up call to the West as to what the Chinese is doing, and the biggest question being, what is their agenda?
American correspondent and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.